Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great day, and we have come to the final day of the week. And let's hope you are enjoying this session. Um, my name is Darshan Divakran. I am the founding president of AUVSI in North Carolina. And if you all are new to this session and to AUVSI's efforts, so AUVSI North Carolina is an organization, it's a nonprofit that promotes unmanned systems and robotics automation within the state of North Carolina. We are a bridge between organizations, agencies, public, private sector, everyone, academia, everyone. So we have started out these educational series in unmanned systems. And today's session is everything you want to know about FAA waivers and authorizations. Let's make it clear today we are not giving out any waivers and authorizations. We're just going to help you understand what it is. Some safety guidelines and some house rules. You can switch on your cell phones as much as you want. You can put on Netflix, whatever you want. You'll miss out on all this information. So I would say, keep your ears open, keep your questions open. There is no exits in this event, so there is no way for you to leave. You have to be a part of this event, and keep your questions for the end. We have the Let's Talk Drones starting at 4 p.m. The link for that event is available. Just look at your screen and you'll see the link. If you haven't registered, it's an Eventbrite link. Please register for it, and we will be moving from here at 4 p.m. to that Zoom session. And it's an informal session, so we can have a lot of discussions on waivers and authorization. So let me just give you some quick facts and why we are here today. So here's a snapshot of the current state of drones in the United States as of September 22nd. We have over 1,705,000 drones registered, out of which 494,000 is commercial drones registered. Over 1 million is recreational drones registered, and we have over 194,388 remote pilots certified. That says the volume, that says how important this technology is. And joining us today are two amazing people, and I'm telling you, they are amazing because what they do and what they are in real life, it's two different people. You'll think that FAA is very serious, and you're not going to be able to have a discussion with them unless you are highly knowledgeable. No, this is two individuals who really are here to educate, and they have been educating nationally, internationally. So let me introduce John Miam, who is an aviation safety analyst in the aviation safety line of business, Office of Flight Standards, Commercial and General Aviation Safety Division, that's located at FAA. And we have Michael O'Shea, is the program manager for the FAA's US Integration Office Safety and Integration Division. So John and Michael, your profile, your title confuses me. Let try and translate it for me in a minute or two, and to the people, like, what exactly do y'all do and how y'all play a role in the education side. John, let me start with you.
Well, we do that on purpose, because part of our mission is to confuse everyone, right? So Mike and I, no, just kidding. But I am my official title is Aviation Safety Analyst. I'm really a jack of all trades, and my mission really is to help mostly public safety, but also even our own FAA people understand the ever-changing policies and rules, ever-evolving the situation here with this. So it's not easy to keep up with, and a big part of my job is helping our Flight Standards District Office folks understand the rules, understand the changes, and I spend a lot of my time helping them, who are hopefully helping you out there in the audience. So, and a big part of my job is keeping Michael O'Shea straight. So, two Irishmen on a Friday afternoon, you're pretty lucky to have us here.
I'm sure that's what, Mike. So let me hand it over to Mike. Mike, so what do you exactly do, and how are you educating, the nation?
You're on mute, Mike.
I think you're on mute, Mike.
That's a one round for all of us.
Wow, I can't believe I did that. But my name is Mike O'Shea. I'm a program manager in the Office of Unmanned Aircraft Systems Integration. My unofficial title is the Public Safety Liaison for that division. What I primarily do is work with public safety agencies, governmental agencies that want to fly UAS. I also have some auxiliary duties that I work on remote ID, anything that touches public safety or could touch public safety. I also work, interestingly enough, I work on some of the consultation with tribal governments and some of the policy we're developing, and working with them and making sure we get the message out about what we're doing with rules and rulemaking efforts at the FAA. And I do a lot of presentations. This is number 3 for the day. But in the virtual world's made it really easy. The FAA likes it because they don't have to pay for us to go anywhere. And I can do a lot of places at one time because I'm not traveling, although I sort of miss that a little bit. But basically, my job is to be a resource for public safety.
Thank you, Mike. So let's open up the session today, and let's open up with one of the most common and confusing thing that people have been, every time this question comes up about is waivers, authorization, exemption. Some people don't know what what regulations are authorizable, but while what are waivable, and what are these exemptions and stuff. So John, just enlighten us and let's do a refreshers really, because
what an easy question.
A lot of questions come up about this.
Well, so let's start with waivers and what are waivers, and really to do that, I think I'm going to bring up a couple of slides. I think would be the best way to introduce that topic. So I'm going to back up a little bit, and if you could bring up the first slide, I want to help everyone understand where do the flight rules fit, and where do you fit within those flight rules? Because when we talk about waivers and exemptions, you have to look at which set of rules are applied, because depending on the set of rules, some of those rules are waivable. Some of those rules you have to request an exemption from, and it's different depending on which part of the Title 14 of the United States Code of Federal Regulations you're flying under. And so I like to put this slide up here really to help folks understand that when we're talking about the flight rules, we're really talking about these ones in the blue boxes here. If you're a public aircraft, and there's a difference between public aircraft and civil aircraft, and it's a complicated topic, but a public aircraft is defined by Congress in the law. It's not defined by the local entity that says, hey, I'm part of a government, therefore I'm a public aircraft. No, that's not the case. When you come to the flight rules, it's a specific definition. But you might, those public aircraft operate under 14 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 91. And who also operates under Part 91 are civil drones that weigh 55 pounds or more. So and there's also others, such as those who are getting a special airworthiness certificate experimental category. Those operate under Part 91. And under Part 91, there's a lot of rules. There's quite a number, and some of those rules are waivable, and some of those rules require an exemption. And when you require, there's an exemption process under Part 11, and it's very detailed, and it's a long, painful story. But and authorizations typically pertain to an airspace authorization. So, but when you're talking about the flight rules, you're really only talking about waivers or exemptions to those flight rules. Most of you in the audience are going to be under Part 107 because you're operating a drone, a civil drone that is under 55 pounds. There are also folks probably on this webinar who are interested in doing beyond visual line of sight cargo delivery or flying across state lines. Those are going to be done under Part 135. And you've heard about Amazon and Google and all the rest, right? They're going to be flying just like just like UPS or FedEx, although they also operate under 121 for their big jets. But so there's all kinds of different parts here. And then up in the far left corner there, you see this little oval-shaped exception for limited rec flyers. They're not really governed by the flight rules, but they're a very specific, very limited cases, and many of the folks who think they're flying as a recreational flyer are in fact really governed by Part 107 because they're not complying with the legal requirements to fly under 44809. And two of the ones that typically come to mind are you must be flying for only recreational purposes. Whether or not you're getting compensation doesn't matter. But if you're flying for any purpose other than recreation, boom, you're bounced into one of these other blue boxes here. And there's other requirements as well, and I won't go into it. But let's go to the next slide because now I'm going to start answering your question. So, you know, these are, if you're flying under Part 107 and you want to get a waiver, there are some, and by the way, this slide deck will be available to all of you after the show here. And they will email. You can get it that way. But you'll go to this web page, and I want to scroll down. So let's go to the next slide. So the next slide is going to be the same page, but if you look on this particular slide, you'll see a list under Part 107 of those 107 regulations that are waivable, and you'll notice that weight is not one of them. We get questions quite often. Hey, I have a drone that weighs 62 pounds. Can I fly under Part 107? And the answer is no. It is not a waivable 107 regulation, and you would be actually bounced into Part 91 to do that because you're more than 55 pounds, and the small UAS rule applies to up to 55 pounds. And so when you go to ask for a waiver, and you'll see there's night, there's operations over people, there's a visual line of sight. Those are the ones that you can ask for a waiver for if you cannot fully comply with Part 107. And when you want to do that, I think one of the questions we often get is, gosh, how do I keep from getting my waiver application denied? And most of the waiver applications that come in, unfortunately, get denied, and people are very frustrated about that. And why is that? And the main reason is that the FAA has an obligation. When you're asking for a waiver, you must provide equal or better safety mitigations for us to say, yeah, okay, this is going to be as safe or better than what the rule requires you to do. So let's go back to the slide deck a second, and let's go to the next slide if we could. And those, I had in there the waiver safety explanation guidelines. And what you want to do is you wanted to click on that other link, and it'll bring up a PDF of questions that are related to each one of those waivable regulations. And we suggest you just copy if you're looking for a waiver to 107.29 to fly at night. And by the way, if you're a public safety entity flying under Part 107, we would suggest you start that process to get that waiver, because more than likely you're going to need to operate at night. So you would go to those waiver safety explanation guidelines, scroll down to the ones that apply to 107.29, and we would suggest you just copy them, paste them into a Word document, and go through them and answer them very carefully and fully. And where most people go wrong is they are very vague about, well, we got this great drone and we're going to just fly it in this area, and that's just not going to cut it for us. We want you to answer those questions, and because a lot of those questions ask, hey, how are you going to do this? What procedure are you going to follow? What risks have you identified? What mitigations are you going to do? And so where most people go wrong is they're very vague. They haven't really sat down and thought through for their particular operation, what are the risks associated with this operation, and what are the mitigations I need to do. And if you want, for example, if you want to fly at night, you need to train your people on the night visual illusions, and you need to document that training, and you need to show the FAA that you have a means of testing that they have demonstrated that they know this stuff, because flying at night, even with a drone, is different, and your depth perception, there's a lot of visual illusions that are important when you do that. And then the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, it's a free download on the FAA's website. Look at that. That's your friend. Take a look at that. And I think the final point I want to make on all of this, and I have more slides, but we'll come to them later, but the final point I want to make on this particular one is remember that the FAA, when you come to the FAA, our business is not your business. And many of you are in public safety. Our business is safety of the air and safety of the people on the ground who might be impacted by that air. So when you come talk to us, remember that our hat, we're wearing an aviation safety hat, and aviation safety is many times different than ground safety. And many times what we see are people that are merely transferring risk from the ground to the air. And that's not going to cut it. That's not sufficient. And then the other thing is, and I'll have this in a later slide, but that we will cover later, but there are others out there who have already blazed the trail, and on the 107 waivers issued webpage, there's a search box. And I would suggest that if you're a police department, or you're a fire department, or you're a search and rescue department, or you're a utility, or whatever, or if you wanted to just look at 107.29, put that in the search box, and that will filter all of those waivers that were issued, and you'll see names pop up, and you might know some of those people. And those people who are on that list, and it is public information for Part 107, they successfully navigated it, and you might want to talk to them and ask them how they did that. So a very long-winded answer, I know, but I hope that helps you. But waivers are particular to a regulation. If you want to be exempted from something, that's called an exemption, and authorizations really tend to pertain to an airspace permission, essentially. Long-winded, I know, but it's never easy. Hope that helps.
That's a lot of good information, and I think one of the things that we need to keep, focusing on is safety. And you mentioned it right. FAA has been in the aviation business for quite some time, and they know what is right, what is wrong. And for manned aviation, it took over 100 years to reach where it is. And it's not going to be a shortcut for unmanned aviation to just, piggyback on that and use that as as the years that they have spent in safety. So there is a lot of safety in this. And I think I'll put one question to you and then move off topic and then come back again on this one. So now, if you're talking about, I'm an agency, I need to get my waiver. You said search for some of the waivers and possibly reach out to those agencies. But most common I've seen is that, and these are issues that have come to us in the past, is that they said we have used exactly the same wordings, but we still haven't. We got rejected.
Yeah.
And
that. Yeah, it's a fair comment. And one of the things that Mike and I are always telling people is that what is happening with UAS is both evolutionary and it's revolutionary. And we all know that the technology is changing every day. And what was true yesterday, or what was acceptable, it's a better way to say, what was acceptable yesterday may not be acceptable today. And so the technology is evolving, and even the criteria are evolving every day as well. And what we found is there's a couple of common frustrations that the waiver team tells me, and I'm not on the waiver team, by the way, so I can't help you, other than give you some coaching. But what they tell me is many of those people are simply copying the waivers issued, because, and remember, what you're going to see when you go to that web page is that's the document that says okay, we're going to grant you this waiver, and here are the conditions that you have to comply with. That's not the application. That's not, which in the application, it also describes what they're going to do. So there, people go wrong with that. And then other people have just blatantly copied the same name, and they're like, okay, well, why would I give a waiver to, you know, Mike and John aerial survey company when they're using Bubba and Boudreaux's aerial survey company stuff, right? It's so obvious. So they're going to deny that because you clearly haven't thought through, you know, and why are they doing this? Why are they? It's because we're not interested in cookie cutter paper copy and paste. We're interested in you going through a thought process, a deliberate process of identifying the risks, identifying the hazards, identifying the risks, and developing tactics and strategies to deal with that. So, but that has happened, and you know, these are also different people may be evaluating it. But I think the number one reason that I'm told is that many of those are because somebody uses something that's 2 or 3 years old, and in drone life, 2 or 3 years is, you know, is a lifetime. It's warp factor 9, right? We're moving at warp factor 9 in the drone world, and what was true yesterday may not work today. So
very true, and that's a really good information. I think that opens up a conversation with Mike on the public safety side. So Mike, we talked about waivers, and I'm sure last couple of weeks especially, you have been busy with this presentation that's tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver. Now, I've been in the industry quite some time and have responded to disasters as a state agency and a public safety agency, everything. But what's the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver, and why is it different from the special governmental interest, that's the HGI?
So they're different a little bit, and we'll kind of explain them, but they kind of complement each other in some ways. But the tactical beyond visual line of sight, we had a lot of operators that wanted the ability to be able to fly. You know, if you're a fire department and you got a facility that you got a large factory that's on fire, you know, in order to fly to the other side of that factory to see if there were hot spots or looking for additional places where you want to put the wet stuff on the red stuff, you would have to move your ground control system or your operation to the other side of that building in order to maintain visual line of sight. So we wanted to give them the ability to go, you know, limited beyond visual line of sight in life-saving operations, to basically see the other side of that building. And for, you know, for law enforcement, you get the barricaded subject, you know, you're out front with the drone, but there could be a deputy eating pit bull in the backyard. You definitely want to avoid that when you go to raid the house. So you want the ability to be able to fly on the other side of that house to see what's on the other side without having to move your whole, you know, ground control system to the other side of that house. So we wanted to give people the ability to get a little farther in their operations, but to do it safely. So the couple things to remember is that it can only be used in conjunction with your existing COA. And the reason why is because you self-certify that drone on your existing COA, and that gives us the ability to allow operations over people, limited operations over people in case of life-saving emergencies. And that's something you don't get with a Part 107. The second thing that you need to know is that when you get this thing, it limits your operation to life-saving operations. And we've been asked several times, what does that mean? It means it could be life-saving for your officers, your firefighters, your emergency workers, or for the citizens you serve. And that's how it should be used. It's not to be used, you know, ad hoc. It's only to be used for life-saving missions, and you need to be able to justify that in case you're questioned about that. The second thing is, in order to increase the safety of the operation, is the second you are done, you know, seeing what you need to see beyond visual line of sight, you need to come back into visual line of sight with that aircraft. So it's only to be used for a very limited amount of time. The other safety issue with it is you must maintain a hard ceiling in Class D airspace of 400 feet. So people have said, well, in 107, if the building's 200 feet, I can go 400 feet above that. Well, this is not 107. This is tactical beyond visual line of sight, and it's done under COA. The hard ceiling is 400 feet, and you're not to exceed 400 feet. If you need to exceed 400 feet, or you need to go farther than 1,500 feet, that's what we have the Systems Operations Support Center, which is available 24/7. You can call them, and you can make a request for what we call an SGI, or Special Governmental Interest, which is sort of like an emergency waiver COA to operate to conduct the operation you need to make. You should know that typically when the Systems Operations Support Center issues a beyond visual line of sight authorization, they have to issue a TFR for that. So it requires further authorizations, further coordination, and it doesn't always happen, because if you're requesting to do it in a major airspace and you're saying, hey, shut down the airspace for me so I can fly a little farther, the answer is probably going to be no, we can't do that. We can't impact the airspace. The other issue with this is you must fly within 50 feet on top of any buildings or facilities or woods or trees. And the reason we ask you do that is to increase the safety of the operation. We have what we call infrastructure masking or shadowing, which is sort of saying that if you're staying close on top of a house or a property or whatever, there's less likelihood for you to have to come into conflict with manned aviation. So we're trying to reduce the conflict with manned aviation as much as we can. So the other nice thing about this is if tactical beyond visual line of sight allows you to conduct this operations at night. It also, because you get that with your existing COA, as long as you meet the conditions for night operations, which John already talked about already. The other thing it allows is operations controlled airspace. And the way that works is if you're in controlled airspace that it's mapped out with facility map altitudes. So, you know, and if you're familiar with LANCE, you've seen the facility map altitudes. So basically, you know, the 5-mile circle around a controlled airspace, you know, it's broken into square grids, square into a circle. I didn't come up with that. So what happens is that, you know, our air facility guys basically said, hey, we think it's safe for people to fly in this grid, in this airspace up to 200 feet, in this space up to 300 feet. And typically the closer you get to the approach and departure end or right on top of the runway, the altitudes go down. So, but using the tactical beyond visual line of sight, you can operate in the facility map altitudes up to that, using that altitude as your hard ceiling. So if the ceiling is 200 feet, that's your hard ceiling. If the ceiling's 300 feet, that's your hard ceiling. And you can do that without any additional coordination with the FAA. The other sort of neat thing about the tactical beyond visual line of sight is there are some airports. Right now we have 81% of all airports are part of the LANCE system. That means there's, you know, 19% that are not, that are still red gridded. The red gridded usually require further coordination with the FAA, but if you're operating under tactical beyond visual line of sight, you can operate in those red grid areas as long as you use those facility map altitudes as your hard ceilings without further coordination with the FAA. We know this tool isn't perfect. We know it doesn't allow you to do everything you probably want to do with the drone, but we think it's sort of that 85% solution to get public safety a little farther along with their life-saving missions in order to assist their public better.
That's really good, and I think really beneficial for public safety agencies. My question to that would be is there are you know, during emergencies or during certain times there are commercial entities that are helping public safety agencies or maybe flying under their COA or assisting them. Are they able to use this, you know, if the public safety agency takes?
So John's smiling because he knows what I'm going to say, but this is a little tricky because since this is done as a COA operation, if you're a commercial entity and you're operating for a state, local, tribal, territory, police or public safety agency, you're required to have an exclusive 90-day lease with that agency. In other words, you just can't come and operate for them for 3 days and then go away. It has to be a 90-day effort by federal law. That's not something that the FAA can.
And it depends on what flight rules are governing this flight, right? So, and to Mike's point,
goes only for tactical beyond visual line of sight, so it has to be the 9-day exclusive lease. The other question you're sort of getting at is how can commercial industry, if you know the power companies do check their lines and that kind of stuff. We're not granting technical beyond visual line of sight to them, but we do grant SGIs to those. We call that through public interest. So we did a lot of this already. In fact, we issued some last week to somebody that was supporting Pacific Gas and Electric to check their lines and the fires that are occurring in California. We allowed them to do some flights along using the SGI process to do some control flights along the power lines to make sure the connections were still there and that they weren't causing additional fires and that kind of stuff. So we do that for public interest as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to follow up or add to what Mike has said, because if you are a civil operator, typically, if you're a Part 107 person and you're a contractor to one of these entities, we would really recommend that you take a look at Advisory Circular 00-1.1B, Public Aircraft Operations. And in there is a chapter, I think it's either 8 or 9, that talks about contracting with a public aircraft entity. And and some of the things, in order to protect yourself and the entity, you need to have filed this in advance with the local FSDO. There's a lot of requirements that have to be done for this to be totally done properly. And so it can a Part 107, can a civilian contractor rather fly as a contractor to a public entity as a public aircraft? Yes, but that public entity has to give you public status in writing. And as Mike said, there's a lot of other hoops to jump through. And guess what? If the FAA looks at the operation and looks at what you've done and says, you know what, you didn't notify us ahead, you didn't have an exclusive contract, you don't meet the statutory requirements, well, that means you're a civil flight governed by Part 107. I mean, it just goes on and on. So you got to be really careful. Is it doable? Yes, absolutely, it's doable. And when you're flying under, and this is something for the COA holders to understand. In fact, if you could bring up my responsibility slide, I think this is a good time for that, because when you're the responsible person or of the COA holder, what does that mean? A lot of people really don't know. They all say, "Oh, big deal," right? It is a big deal. And if you're that person, that's the neck we're going to grab, because you're accountable to the FAA for compliance with those, and you're the person who's going to be accountable and assuring that the entity and your contractors are in compliance with your COA and your rules. And responsible persons are also typically involved with a 107 waiver. And that's different than the remote pilot in command. And there is responsibility also. There's really two shoulders that responsibility falls under. One is the remote pilot himself or herself. And both, whether you fly under Part 91 as a public aircraft or whether you fly under Part 107 as a civil operator, or actually Part 91 as a large civil, Part 91.3A, the pilot in command is responsible for those decisions and is accountable. So if you go do something that is in violation of the regulations or you do something that's negligent and you do it willfully, we're probably going to have a very stern conversation. And there are sanctions that, there have been helicopter units, for example, that have gotten their pilot certificates suspended for 6 months because of doing something naughty. And so it's not a get out of jail free card. And you're still, no matter which set of flight rules you're flying under, the expectation and everyone's safety depends on you fully complying with those flight rules. And if you can't fully comply, maybe the weather's bad, maybe you do need to go beyond visual line of sight, and you don't have that tactical beyond visual line of sight COA edition. Or maybe, by the way, if you're using your existing COA and you get that amendment, you can't fly within 2 nautical miles of a medevac helipad without other authorizations. So, there's a lot of things you got to be careful about. And the pilot in command is going to be held accountable for those decisions, and also the responsible person. So it's not something to be taken lightly.
Thanks, John. So, Michael, a question on on the public safety side I would bring up is, with the U.S. integration pilot program, coming to an end, and there's the next steps what FAA is going to be doing. What is the what solutions, or what is coming up for the public safety agencies to be prepared, and what changes came up in the last 3 years?
So there's several things that came up. One is, obviously the program, the IPP, or the Integration Pilot Program, is being it sunsets by law in October. and it's being replaced or sort of migrated to a new program called Beyond. And what they're really trying to do in the future is look at alternate means of compliance and technologies and the ability to fly beyond visual line of sight. What does it take for us to safely get from here to there? And that's what they're going to work on. As far as public safety and what the IPP has brought to the table, there's several different things that they've done, but probably the most visible one is the drone as a first responder that was done by the Chula Vista Police Department in California. Essentially what they were doing is they had on top of their police department, which is approximately about 6 stories high with it's not really 6 stories, but it really is 6 stories with just the different heights and stuff. But on top of their roof, they had a launching pad area for their drone. And then inside their command center, they had basically and if I thought I got great pictures of it I took when I was out there. But they have in their command center, they basically have a room that's set up just to be sort of this drone as a first responder room, and it has multiple monitors that show what the drone sees. It shows flight aware programs and that kind of stuff, and it shows the city. And basically what they do is if they get a 911 call that possibly could be dangerous to the officers responding or dangerous to the people that are already there on the ground, they'll launch this drone, and they've mapped out their city to make sure they avoid schools, other public places that you probably shouldn't fly a drone over, that you'd be concerned about fell out of the sky. They mapped out places that they had bad radio propagation, so that that wouldn't be an issue when they fly the aircraft. And IPP was designed to sort of test the system. So they granted them the authority to fly out 3 statute miles from the top of that roof. And the goal was that they would probably, and most likely did, lose sight of the aircraft, but they kept sight of the airspace. So they basically had to have somebody on the roof who was also a remote pilot in command, who also had a set of controls that could launch the bird on the authority from the command center. The command center would send the GPS coordinates directly to the bird via a program they had. The bird would fly out to that coordinates, avoiding any kind of airspace or avoiding the ground area that they might have any issues with. And then it would go on site and then provide sort of that situational awareness for the public safety agency when they're responding. And it worked really well. In Chula Vista. So the next question we sort of get now that the IPP is sunsetting, how do we migrate that program to other agencies? And the question we're sort of asking within the FAA is, yeah, we think we can do that, but what is it going to look like? We know we sort of pressed, the limitations with the IPP program. So are we really going to grant 3 miles, which is sort of 6 miles, 3 miles each way? Are we going to grant 1 mile? Are we going to grant whatever? Nobody has made that decision yet. We're still sort of walking our way through that. We're sort of waiting we've talked with some agencies who are interested in adopting drone as a first responder to start walking them through the effort to see what the actual steps are going to be to take. And we still have to sort of look at the final report that comes out of the IPP that's going to tell us, what worked in this process, what didn't work in this process, what were our concerns about this process with the drone as a first responder, so we can address all those issues when we develop sort of the way forward for other agencies who want to adopt this.
Nice, good information in that part. And so a question to both of you all, and we'll start with John. What are the 3 top avoidable mistakes that you would tell? I would say, for example, take all the commercial sector, the industry, that they should avoid when they are going after waivers and authorizations, exemptions. What are 3 most common mistakes that they should avoid?
I think the number one mistake that when they're looking for waivers or authorization, the number one mistake is many times people jump into the swimming pool before they've really done use case analysis. I think that's the number one mistake. People go out and say, "Oh, I got this great drone. Now what do I do with it?" I think that's a mistake, because you've probably acquired an expensive piece of technology that may not meet your mission profile, and then you're going to have to go out and spend more money. So I would say do that. Then get community buy-in. I think they go hand in hand. But the other big mistake, I think, is they don't, if they're flying under Part 107 they typically say, well, I'm a good guy and I'm going to fly safely, so why don't you give me the waiver? And denied, and they get frustrated because they're not really following the waiver safety explanation guidelines. They're not focusing on the how and the procedures. Think of why do airlines use checklists? Because they work, right? They work. And so the FAA loves procedures. They love checklists. They love identification of hazards. And I think that's where people go wrong. And I think also organizationally, they're not taking advantage of existing aviation resources that are available to them. And what comes to my mind are large companies that have a business jet flight operations department. They ought to be talking to those guys, because those folks are aviators, longtime aviators. Now, there may be some issues. Maybe they perceive you as a threat to their job, even though you're a complementary service. Many agencies have helicopter units, and those helicopter units are staffed with people who understand airspace. They understand procedures. They understand the aviation culture, the aviation mindset. And I think lastly, when I know Mike and I have conversations with public safety, Mike more so than me, but I have them also. And I think one of the disappointments to me is that a lot of times these UAS units are not really, it's not well understood in their higher units that we consider you to be, no kidding, a real aviator. And real aviators know their business, and they have a culture, they have an aviation safety culture. And it is not acceptable to us to want to transfer ground risk to air risk. And I remember one of the early conversations I had with a large metropolitan city. They wanted to have these drones flying next to Chicago O'Hare Airport, flying at 100 miles an hour doing car chases. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Well, we have people injured in a car crash. So they, oh, okay, but what about that's 777 that you're going to kill 300 people with? Oh, that's not my problem. It's like, that just doesn't sit well with us. That's a real story, but again, it's that culture. But I would say those are the biggest ones.
So, Mike, the same question to you on the public safety side. Unlike industries that have a lot of financial backing to do, go make mistakes again and again and everything, they can hire a bunch of experts to write stuff. When it comes to public safety, you have that one person who is doing everything from flying the drone to managing the program to cleaning the drone and even filing your paperwork. So what mistakes are they avoid and to further not delay the process?
So first of all, about the fact that they don't probably have the financial resources to have dedicated staff to take care of the paperwork. And that's why we really recommend that you collaborate with other folks, with AUVSI, with drone responders, even with us at the FAA. We're happy to help walk people through our systems and sort of explain the nuances, because we are the federal government. There's going to be nuances. But the biggest issue, and John sort of talked about this earlier, is when you get to the FAA, you basically, they put the chip in your neck that says aviation safety. Everything we do is because of aviation safety. That's our primary mission, is keeping the national airspace safe. So what happens a lot of times with public safety agencies is they reach out to us and say, hey, I want to fly at night because I'm the Acme Fire Department or the Acme Police Department, and we catch bad guys, or we put the wet stuff on the red stuff, put out fires and save lives, and people love us, so you need to let us fly at night, for example. And when we deny them, they're kind of astounded that, did you miss the fact that we told you we catch bad guys, put out fires? And we try to tell them that your mission is really important, and we definitely support your mission, but it's not our mission. Our mission is airspace safety. So you need to talk to us if you want something from us. If you want to operate safely in the NAS, the national airspace, then you need to talk to us in our language, which is aviation safety. So you need to be able to say, hey, I want to fly at night on the Acme Fire Department, and I'm going to do it so safe that my operators, they will never be out in daylight hours. They'll have, special surgery to make their eyes see better at night. They'll be vampires, whatever. Our lights on our drones are going to be so bright that you can see them from the space shuttle. That's what we want to hear. We want to hear people that are thinking in terms of safety. How is my operation going to be safe? How am I going to be safe operating in the national airspace? The whole goal here is not to impact normal operations in the national airspace. And that's what you need to sort of tell us. And some public safety people do a great job, and some people don't. And part of my job is, John's in flight standards. When they get a public safety waiver request that they just missed the mark completely, I get those. They send them to me, and then they have me work with the agency to sort of walk through the issues. One of the common things we're sort of seeing a lot right now is we get people who request beyond visual line of sight waivers without any safety mitigation or technologies or anything, just saying, hey, we need to fly beyond visual line of sight because we're the Acme Police Department or Fire Department. And they also forget that if you can't see the aircraft, then you need to also have a waiver for flights over people, because if you can't see where the aircraft's at, you don't know if it's flying over people. So you need to have a waiver for that too. And the problem with it is for most public safety agencies that their aircraft don't have the technologies to provide alternate means of compliance for 91113, which is see and avoid, or in a case of an unmanned aircraft system, sense and avoid. The technologies just don't exist in their price range right now for them to conduct those operations. And so then they sort of get mad at us sometimes because they're like, but we need to do this. And the answer is, that's really on industry to come up with the technical solutions to meet federal law that you need to abide by. And I think it's coming. I mean, I think the technologies are coming that allow people to do these operations. But I think right now when you're applying for a waiver, we try to make it very simple for you. We have the waiver safety guidelines, which is sort of the checklist that you need to follow when you apply for a waiver. And if you're not following that waiver and waiver safety guideline, that's probably the number 2 thing I see, is just the comment back from the waiver team saying, did not follow waiver safety guideline. And the reason you got to follow that is because they get thousands of waiver requests, and it's a very small team. And the way they do it very quickly is by making sure you hit all the check marks that you need to hit to get whatever specific operation you're requesting. So if you don't use that, they have no way to use their, to figure out whether or not you're hitting all those safety processes that we want in place before you conduct that operation in the national airspace. So it's essential that you use the waiver safety guidelines. And the other thing is, like I said, use the resources that are out there. I mean, you don't have to recreate the wheel. You can get a lot of help and assistance from organizations like AUVSI, drone responders, and even us at the FAA.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on, if I could, that I wanted to touch on Mike raised a most excellent point about the technology. And, listen, we all want to enable total beyond visual line of sight. We want 24/7, 0/0 weather. We want that, right? But let's face it, these are initial entry machines that are operating on home Wi-Fi systems as far as the spectrum, right? So the signal is highly susceptible to interference. There's a lot of issues with that. We all are aware of flyaways and loss of control, right? These are happening. The batteries are failing, right? This is generation 1 of the UAS world. The Holy Grail is a system that can be either on or a layered defense of detect another aircraft, non-participating aircraft. I'm a helicopter pilot, and Mike, I know he's going to be shaking his head, but when I think about a drone hitting my tail rotor, it's going to kill me, right? And if you're operating in an urban environment, you better be thinking about those medevac folks who are operating in the same environment. And I would hope that you're thinking about them, because they're not going to see you. They're going to be focused on getting that patient to the landing pad. And so we need you to be thinking about them. It's a little bit different. It's a mind shift. It's a mindset shift. But the technology, that's the point I really wanted to come back to. We would love to be able to say, yeah, just go do it. Let them go do it autonomously. But the reality is the technology isn't there yet. And because it isn't there yet is why we make you go through all of this pain and suffering to think through your procedures and your mitigations, so that given the fact that your machine might fly away, or if you want to operate over people, do Do you have a parachute? You know, well, one day they might not need that, right? Because the technology isn't there. So that's part of why we're being such sticks in the mud sometimes, and not saying, yeah, carte blanche, just go, you know, do whatever you want. It's because the technology isn't there yet.
And I totally agree with that part, because being a manned aviator myself, I know the concerns, safety concerns, and everything. And I do want to fly manned aircrafts, and I do want to continue flying drones. So end of the day, both sides have to exist. And so this question, I have heard people saying this, and and it's not more like a question. It's more like giving this information to the people. So a lot of times when applications are submitted and everything and gets rejected and everything, I hear people saying that the people in that office don't know really what drones can do. They may be all manned aviators. How do they know what is good and what is bad? And I've heard this.
I'm a helicopter pilot. I know what a drone can do to my helicopter, right?
So
I'm switching it around, right? I'm switching it around. Because we know that drones can impact a wing, right? So listen, we would love this, right? I would love to be able to live in Montana and have pizza delivered to me, you know, and still warm. I mean, we would love that. And we would love to I live next to the Colonial Pipeline, and every Wednesday I see a 182 flying at low level, 300 feet past my street, and I know the aviator is not looking at the pipeline. He's trying to avoid the hawks that are flying there. Well, guess what? Those drones that are going to be doing package delivery are going to be in the same airspace. So, and so one day it will be there, and we will be joyously celebrating, right? But until that day arrives where that drone, because remember, the whole airspace system is built on one fundamental principle. Right, and if that one fundamental principle is undermined, it all collapses in a house of cards. And you know what that is? It's see each other and get out of each other's way. Because if my radios fail, right, if everything else fails, I can still aviate and fly the aircraft and get out of each other's way, right? And so when a drone is flying, typically the drone has got a camera on it, and they're looking in the direction of flight. You know, there's a great video, well, it's a scary video up in Niagara Falls, right? The guy's flying the drone, and a Hughes 500 goes flying 40 feet from behind it, right? It's real, it really happened. That's scary, right? So, because that machine didn't have a system in it that said, there's a helicopter coming from your 6, get out of the way, right? And but one day it will be there,
true, which
will be awesome. But until that point, then we've got to have some other irritating, frustrating limitations on drones.
Makes sense. And that's the thing. And that's a message to people, is that, everyone sitting in the FAA office reviewing your applications don't need to actually know every detail of that technology, because technology keeps changing, but they have a basic idea. They're all aviators. They understand what the technology can do. Just because some new modifications have come on the technology, they've added 10 sensors or 20 cameras, that does not really change anything.
It doesn't impress me. No, it doesn't impress me, because, right, what is the mission of the FAA? The mission of the FAA is the safety and efficiency of a shared national airspace system. That's the mission, right? The mission is not to say, man, we're gonna save $45 by flying this drone 2,000 miles, and if it hits an ultralight, that's collateral damage. No, it doesn't cut it. It just doesn't cut it, right? One day it'll be there. One day it'll be there, and we will love that.
No, I think that's perfect, and I think we come to our last question for this session.
Can I comment on your last question? So your question was really, what does the FAA, are we sitting in sort of an ivory tower in DC and making decisions or creating policy without really knowing what's going on with the drones out there? And we try to do a very good job, in government. We try as hard as we can is to involve stakeholders in what we do, because we know we're not the experts. We're not. So we have stuff like the DAC, the Drone Advisory Committee. We have the UAS safety team to bring in different folks. We have the drone. What are the peer drone guys? What's that?
Drone responders.
The FAA drone
safety team.
Yep. We have the drone folks are going out there, and all these people are providing input into what we do. And when we create new rules and regulations, we don't do that in a vacuum. We just did the remote ID rule, 53,000 comments. And I'm sure there's people out there, I've heard this before, that say, well, you guys didn't read all those. I can tell you, I had the public safety comments, which are about 6,000 comments. I read every single one. It took me a month, I think. And I had to categorize all those comments and create responses. So we read every single comment. And so we get input from the community. And you're talking to somebody who owns 6 drones right now that are in my house that my wife wishes I owned a lot less. And I use them to take pictures and to fly off my boat, that kind of stuff. And I'm also a manned aviation pilot too. So, I mean, I like them both, and I like, messing around with both. But most people in the FAA, I think they have a really good knowledge of what UAS is and what the technology is. But I think when we don't, we look to our stakeholders to provide that input and that information. We're not creating this stuff in a vacuum.
Yeah, and we really do take those comments and consider them. And there were some changes to some recent rules because of that. And it's not a paperwork exercise. They really do. And that is the great opportunity. That's a great point, Mike. Great point.
Yeah, and I like the question. I'm not trying to sound really defensive here.
True, yeah.
I think the person who asked that question, they need to look at the DAC. They need to look at the UAS safety team and some of the other things where they can provide that input, because we welcome them, and that's sort of what we do for a living. And people forget at the end of the day. I never do. I always tell myself, I work for you. You don't work for me. So you need to tell me what you want, and that's what we're creating a safe airspace for you, and also for me, because I'm also a taxpayer as well. But that's what we do for a living.
No, and that was really the last question. Was you brought up the last question pretty well, and you explained it. I'm going to try and summarize what we did today. And remember, we have not done with this session. Once we wrap up at 4 p.m., we'll be moving to Let's Talk Drones. Yes, good job.
One more thing. Can you show my last slide, which was some handy tools? And then I'll hand it back to you. But
sure, yeah, absolutely.
The slide deck. There are some. We also provide some information for you, and it's got the SGI process information. It's got the advisory circular information waiver. So that's in the slide deck as well. So back to you, Darshan.
Sure, yeah. So all these slides will be available. We will be all those who are registered for the event. We'll be emailing all this information, the slides. There's a bunch of useful links which John and Michael have put together. We'll be sending that, and any other additional information that come out of today's session also we'll be putting out. Trying to just summarize just this session. One thing we as Michael answered the last question was. He himself has drones. He flies drones. They are manned aircraft pilots. So this gives you a clear message that somewhere before I heard FAA is no longer your grandfather's FAA. They have changed. So let's make sure people understand that. Don't go by the hair and everything. That's that Irish look that you're giving. But let me make that clear. But FAA knows what they're doing, and some. 3 key points that I would bring out from today's session was that, one, FAA recognizes you as an aviator. Let's make that clear. A lot of time I have heard leadership saying that, this is not like manned aviation in companies and organizations. When FAA says, and they say clearly that you are an aviator, I think organizations should take this seriously, like this is part of aviation. Secondly, you heard from the experts saying that connect with organizations. There is a wealth of information. There is wealth of there's a lot of organizations out there who have spent hours, money, everything to get work on standards creation and information. Reach out to them. You won't realize how easy it is to reach out to them. And I've heard people saying that who do I contact? You can just reach out to any one of us and anyone in the industry that has been there for quite some time, and they will point you in the right direction. And third thing is, when it comes to waivers and authorization, information is good. A lot of information you can put in your document, but you have to ensure you are putting information that shows safety, because they're not interested to know what the how cool the drone looks or how fast the drone moves. Yes, they want to know what safety guidelines you're measuring, and it has to be. There's no difference between unmanned aviation, manned aviation when it comes to safety. Everything is operating in the national airspace, and here we are ensuring safety. So I think we have summarized this session great. We are going to be moving to the next session, that's Let's Talk Drones, where we're going to have informal discussions on a lot of these topics and more. We are going to be able to take your questions. We can either you can ask the questions directly or post the questions. The link is available. Make sure you go to the Eventbrite, register, and you'll get the Zoom link. We are not done with our two favorite Irishmen. We are going to take them to the next, to the next session. So stay tuned, and we'll see you on the other side. Have a nice day, everyone.
Ciao.